creating a culture of love.
We're unhappy with where we're at. Who am I?
I don't like conflict. I don't go looking for conflict.
You're resisting something. You're judging something. You're not present.
Like you didn't matter.
Can't actually describe who we are. We can only experience who we are.
Well, welcome to the studio, Bradley. I mean, Rachel. So you flew in from Dallas, right? Just to be here today, to be here. Thank you. Thank you for the honor. But, why do you do what you do? Tell me a little bit about you. Because we had a beautiful conversation yesterday, just a quick high level on self-worth and perfectionism and how does that play a role into love. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about who you are first so that we can go down that path.
Yeah, that's always a big question, right? Like, who are you? And I think it's interesting, right? Because we were talking off camera of typically we just list out all of the things that we've accomplished. So if I were to go that route, I would say, I'm Rachel. I'm a certified functional medicine dietitian. I have my own business. I've served, X amount of people, which would make me seem pretty cool. But the truth is I'm not any of those things. That's not who I am at my core. Those are things that I've accomplished in my life as a byproduct of the person that I have become ultimately. And fitness is something that I'm super passionate about. And I know we also talked about, let's talk about fitness and self-love and all of that. And for most people who follow me online on social media, they'll see the fitness side because that's really where my journey began. It began in fitness. I grew up pretty insecure, unconfident. I was actually the shy girl, meaning where I was the girl who was at the back of the classroom, would never speak up, would never use my voice. When I would raise my hand, I would kind of partially put my hand up.
Yeah, uncommitted.
Yeah, uncommitted. Like, okay, I want to say something kind of. And then when the teacher would call on me, I would have a very quiet voice. And they'd be like, what? I can't hear you. I can't hear you. So I was always very shy, insecure growing up from just the way I viewed myself. I feel like I created the meaning very early on that what I had to say didn't matter.
Ooh.
It didn't really matter. So I grew up pretty insecure. And when I went off to college, I wanted to study nutrition and dietetics, partially because I was a gymnast and I was a dancer. So athletics was always my escape. It's how I got any attention growing up too, since I grew up in a home that was, not that great. My parents weren't around a whole lot, but it was like, hey, gymnastics, Rachel, look at her muscles, flex all the time. It was that's where worth and acknowledgement was given. So I thought, hey, let me study nutrition and dietetics. Let me combine that with my athletic background. And I got into bodybuilding probably around the age of 18. And it was one of the first times I ever felt confident in my life, right? I had grown up, like I said, not very confident. And I think for a lot of us, when we get started on our fitness journey, or we get started on a lot of personal development journeys, right? We're coming from a place of not feeling good in our body. We're unhappy with where we're at, whether that's looking in the mirror and being like, who am I in this body? We're so overweight, unhealthy, we're depressed, we're at some kind of a rock bottom, and I can't say I was overweight or anything like that. I just was insecure. But fitness for me, it gave me this strength that I didn't know that I had. And my body started to change. So it was like a mental example of what was happening physically, right? But also mentally pushing myself to see what I was really capable of.
To interject, before we keep going down, I'm like, I need to go back. So one, you felt like you didn't matter. And you didn't come from a present home, let's say. Your parents weren't there. But where do you think the root of not mattering came from? And then we'll pivot to fitness and how I use fitness. And I think you found control and power. It was something that you can control
for sure
in that moment. And that was a way for you to grasp a powerful Rachel.
Yeah. And as I'm saying, I don't matter here now today about my upbringing. It's not something that I had awareness of when I was younger. I did not have the thought of like, oh, I don't matter, so I'm not going to raise my hand or I'm not going to speak up. You know, that realization has come from really my later 20s, now that I'm 30, doing all of this healing work and really trying to identify the way in which I was relating to myself, which is the view I've had of myself. And through uncovering and peeling back a lot of the layers, I uncovered that I had certain beliefs about myself that I created, not anybody else created, but I created these beliefs. I created beliefs of I'm stupid. I created beliefs of I don't matter. And all of these beliefs have created my life circumstances and my relationships, have created certain behaviors. And that further creates that meaning of, oh, these are true. This is really how I am. I am stupid. I am not good enough. And we all have these
It's a
type of
self-fulfilling
beliefs.
prophecy.
Yeah. So that part came way, way, way later on. So I was very unconscious in a lot of these beliefs. So like it's an underlying unconscious belief of that manifested in not speaking. So the behaviors that came as a byproduct was I was shy. I didn't speak up. You know, I had a very, very quiet voice. I didn't put myself out there. I didn't take a whole lot of risks. And then when I found fitness, right, just like you said, and you hit it on the head, it gave me a sense of control. It gave me a sense of control in a world I felt like I really had no control, especially growing up in a pretty dysfunctional home. And I felt like, okay, this is a way to create this confidence, right? And it did create a confidence in me, but it was a confidence that didn't really stay, if that makes sense. Meaning, you know, it really came from my physical body.
It's superficial.
It was a superficial confidence for sure. So, you know, I started to post on Instagram. I got really into bodybuilding. I started to compete in bodybuilding competition, not like the big bodybuilder type stuff. I'm very little,
like physique.
Bikini, like the fit Victoria's Secret models kind of competitions. And I was really good at it, you know, and so it'd be one thing as if I wasn't achieving a lot, but I was achieving a great amount of success now in this world, coming from being that shy, insecure little girl. And I got to 10% body fat. I grew my social media to over 200,000 just because of my body. Now at this point, everyone's like, oh my gosh, Rachel Scheer, her body, it's incredible. And a lot of this praise. And don't get me wrong, there was a ton of hard work. There was a ton of discipline, which is why I respect anybody in the fitness industry, right? It takes a ton of discipline and hard work. But we often don't ask the question of where are we really coming from?
The why, the purpose, or the drive.
In this place. And just like I said, we may start from a place of insecurity, not feeling good, which is totally okay. It's totally okay to start from that place, but that can't be what keeps us going. At some point, we do really need to heal that relationship we have with ourselves. Otherwise, there will always be a negative byproduct, you know? So for me, as I continued to push my body physically, got to 10% body fat, was competing in these bikini competitions, I ended up with a lot of health issues. And I ended up with thyroid issues, hormonal imbalances. I had no menstrual cycle. My thyroid plummeted. My hair started to fall out. My skin was erect.
Did you end up with, because I studied exercise science and kinesiology, and I was an athlete, and I was around a lot of athletes. And in women, when they get really lean, there's like the female athlete triad.
Yeah.
You lose the menstrual cycle. You start, you know, having a lot of hormonal issues that start affecting you that can spiral out of control, that could lead to depression and lead to some other things. Were those some of the symptoms as well, or?
Yeah, it makes sense now looking back, right? So our body responds to various stressors. Our bodies are smart. They're just responding to whatever stimulus we're inputting, right? And that input could be our nutrition. You know, are we eating real whole food that loves us back? Are we eating inflammatory food? Our body's going to respond negatively. do we have a ton of stress? And stress can be emotional stress, like you're in a toxic relationship or, no work-life balance, but this can also be unaddressed trauma, right? That we haven't really done healing work for, where we have a hypervigilant nervous system and we're responding to various things, maybe on a higher degree than what we really should be. It can be environmental too. So as a functional medicine dietitian, I do all the testing. I look at things like heavy metals and mold and pathogens. And just this last week, I had like 3 people come back with a parasite. So those are stressors on the body too, right? So there's a lot of things that can cause the body to become off. But right, looking at my situation, being at 10% body fat it's not healthy anymore. And it's not about health at that point. It's about aesthetics.
Yeah.
And when you're at that low of a body composition, your body tries to compensate. It slows everything down. So thyroid slows down, your hormones decrease, your body's like, hey, we're not healthy enough to actually have a menstrual cycle anymore. There's no way we could have a baby in this place that we're at right now, composition-wise. And I ended up with a ton of gut issues. So my motility, my gut came to a halt, which tends to happen when we have a low thyroid, as everything just begins to slow down as a byproduct. And my diet at the time, although I always say it was macro friendly, so I was hitting my protein and my carbs and all that kind of stuff, it wasn't very gut friendly. So it was full of still like artificial sweeteners and these pre-workouts and these post-workouts and these foods that weren't necessarily healthy for my gut. So as a byproduct, I ended up with a ton of bacterial overgrowth in my gut, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And at this point, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like I'm very delusional at this point of my own healing journey. And I'm thinking like, why is this happening? I'm physically fit. I'm a fitness model. Now I'm a registered dietitian. I went to school for that. Why is this happening to me? This doesn't make sense. And
you have this sense of confidence and control and power that you didn't have, right?
Confidence, control. I have all this notoriety now because of my body from the outside looking in, and even going to Western medicine physicians. They're like, I mean, yes, your thyroid's low. Here's thyroid medication. Here's birth control. But like, you seem pretty healthy. And my labs came out outside of my hormones, my thyroid. I was relatively healthy. They did some tests to look at my gut, and they're like, okay, colonoscopy, endoscopy, all of that's normal. So here's some laxatives, and I was sent on my way. And, my physical health continued to get worse and worse and worse over that year, where I was eventually sent to a colorectal surgeon. And they even suggested I remove my entire large intestine now at this point, because my motility, my gut actually came to a halt where I couldn't even use the restroom at all without an enema. So I'd had to do an enema every single day. So my physical health really took a plummet. And honestly, that's where my healing journey really started to begin.
Awesome. So we have all these physical things that you started winning life at, right? And a lot of us start taking control, start winning, finding success in not the greatest places, right? Or different addictions or different escapes. I use fitness a lot too to escape. I'd break up in a relationship. Let me go sprint 6 miles on the treadmill, or, to get the pain out. So some of us operate that way. And then you found all this out, and then you had to heal. But what made you really start realizing like, hey, I need to start working on my self-health, my mental health, my emotional well-being? It's not just the physical, right? Because a lot of that other stuff triggered you to get onto this journey, right?
Yeah.
So was it that life and death kind of situation, or was it like, no, there's still also something else here?
I did a lot of the physical stuff to start out. I was like, I'm going to do all the elimination diets, which helped to an extent. I did various protocols for my gut microbiome. So I got into functional medicine. That's what actually got me started on the functional medicine path to then become certified in functional medicine myself and get obsessed with learning everything I could about gut health and the power of our microbiome. But I would make some strides and then I would relapse and I would relapse. So physically I would get a little bit better, but there was like this piece still missing to the full picture. And one thing I always tell my clients is the whole person must heal for the gut to function optimally. The whole person, and our gut is our second brain. Our gut and our brain are very interconnected. So as much as our diet impacts our gut health, our mental health, the way in which we relate to ourselves, makes a massive impact in our gut. So when we have chronic stress, unaddressed trauma, when our body is chronically going into this fight or flight state, our digestive system completely shuts down. And when our digestive system shuts down, this leads to a chronic elevation of cortisol. So cortisol is in the bodybuilder world, we try to avoid like the hawk because it breaks down muscle tissue, but our gut lining is also a muscle tissue as well. So we have chronically elevated cortisol. This begins to break down the gut lining, leading to intestinal permeability, otherwise known as leaky gut. We then can develop food sensitivities. These are a byproduct of having a leaky gut because we get bacteria, foods, and toxins leaking into our bloodstream, which stimulates an immune and inflammatory response. And then our gut is shut down and we're not producing digestive enzymes. We're not producing anything that we need in order to break down all of our food. So bacteria can begin to overgrow. So it starts to make sense of, okay, chronic stress, fight or flight, which whatever may be causing that, our work, not sleeping, unaddressed trauma, is going to lead to these gut imbalances. So I did a lot of those physical protocols on myself. And eventually I started to, I'd say first get into like talk therapy kind of stuff, and which it didn't really do a whole lot for me for. I mean, I think it can be great for some people. I think talk therapy, it can sometimes be the first seed you need to get planted in order to like open the door to greater levels of healing. But talk therapy really keeps you still on this egoic level of healing. So it was when I really started to dive into my stuff, dive into the way I was viewing myself and do a lot of that deep healing work, that my body began to fully heal. And not even just heal, but really get to a place of actual peace. I didn't know for a lot of my life what true peace actually was. I don't feel like I ever had that. Like looking back at my childhood, I mean, we won't go childhood route, all of that, but looking at back at my life, I didn't know what inner peace was. So being able to get to a place of full inner peace, which I call, surrender, non-resistance, non-judgment. And it doesn't always mean, right, that we're going to be happy or joyful, but it just means peace. Non-resistance was the most incredible thing. And from there, to be able to create from that place, I think that's really where we can begin to live an inspiring life, which is now really the journey that I'm on.
So, you bring up peace, and I've had enough conversations now on this show, and a lot of times we come back to, it's not all the other things. It's peace. How do we find peace? And how do we find peaceful moments, right? Now with practice of meditation and breathing and calming, I think more people are aware of trying to seek that, but realizing that that's also a practice. And then what does that really mean? So it's beautiful that you get to that point. I'm starting to realize, like, I'm just seeking peace. I'm not a person that likes conflict, so I try to avoid it.
Confidence?
Conflict.
Oh, conflict.
So it's like, I don't like conflict. I don't go looking for conflict. So sometimes having those tough conversations could fall under conflict. You're like, no, I'm trying to find peace. But then that's a conflict against peace in itself. So it's just interesting, that inner peace conversation we've been having a lot. But going a couple steps back, I could have a similar concept there. And I was like, why are we on a show that normally talks about love talking so deep about the gut? So I'm fit, I'm healthy, I eat clean, zone diet, blocks, paleo, you name it, macros, I've done it all. And I got full blood work. And I'm like, why am I tired? Why am I recovering like I used to? Why do I feel more stress or not sleep as good. And then you do the blood work and you're this and you're that. And they're like, oh, you have leaky gut. I'm like, what the hell is leaky gut? I don't have, just to be frank, like, dude, my underwear is clean. I wipe good, right? That's where most people think, like, I don't leak out. Like, what's happening here? And you start unpacking that and learning. And sometimes, and I'm saying this for a reason, we got two fit, healthy, normal weight people right here talking about that, because sometimes people think, oh, it's the super overweight or the obese or the anorexic, or the extremes are the people that are having issues. But you could be a walking, perfectly healthy human and still have issues and not realize it.
Or we would think healthy, right? Meaning
The
they're
book
at a
is
healthy body
yeah.
composition. And I think that's the misconception, right? Is if you are at a good body composition, weight and height, that means you're healthy. I've met a lot of people who are physically fit who are very unhealthy in their life.
Yeah.
And I actually give the definition of health, one, on the physical side, to optimal feeling and function. And then on the spiritual side, I give the meaning of internal peace and wholeness. And that's what health is, where on the opposite, right, illness would be dis-ease in the body.
Yep.
So I break those apart purposely. It's dis-ease in the body. So there's going to be an imbalance somewhere. And symptoms are really a whisper for us to take more notice of something that isn't in alignment. And this doesn't always mean physically not in alignment, but this could also mean emotionally and spiritually not in alignment. And then illness is also external searching. It's external searching. So I think that is really where the healing work becomes so important, because most of us have been conditioned to believe that our worth is tied to everything that is outside of us. So defining healing, it is really unbecoming in a lot of ways. Like, we have become, as we were raised by our parents throughout society, what has conditioned us to believe that we are our physical body, the society standard of beauty. We are our achievements. We are our failures. We are what's happened to us. We are all of the successes we've had. We are our home, our income. We are all of these things. And if we're all of those things, we're always gonna be chasing after those things. And we're always hustling for our worthiness. And it doesn't mean we can't have these things, right? So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a very successful entrepreneur. I love being physically fit. I'm never going to stop wanting to be physically fit. But there's a big difference between saying I am those things and putting my worth in those things versus just wanting and desiring those things. So I think it's really defining the difference. And for a lot of us, we have our worth based in those things because that's what we've been conditioned to believe. And that is really the egoic, unconscious view of life that a lot of us walk around with.
No, and in my early 20s, what you're saying is completely landing, because that's what I did. And a lot of men that I know, we're judged by what we have, what we amass, what we could show as success. And that's not necessarily the truth. And then and I think we touched on this, is like, what is your why and your purpose? If you want the really nice car because you love the car and you just want it, that's one thing. But if you need the car to define who you are, I am this car and I am successful because I have this car. Very much different than the other. I am are two of the most powerful words you could say before anything.
Yeah.
I am, fill in the blanks. That's what you are. I am unworthy. Guess what? You're going to be unworthy. I am sick. You're going to make yourself sick. I'm not enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not whatever. And it's important.
And I think, abundance, right, says I am perfectly content with where I'm at. So abundance at the core is presence. It's full presence where you're at right here in the moment, and gratitude for all that is around you. So you're like, I don't need these things, but hey, while I'm here in this physical body, I would like to have these things.
Yeah.
And it actually allows for the attainment of those things to be that much easier, right? And we also don't hold on to things in our life, right? So we could say relationships, that's what a lot of us struggle with, right? So we also put our worth in that relationship. Doesn't mean we don't want to have like a beautiful relationship and to have that kind of love. Of course, we all do. We all do. But right, it becomes problematic when our worth is tied to that relationship.
Yeah.
When I am that relationship and I need to hold on to that relationship in order to feel a sense of worthiness, and your power really comes in. Your power comes in when you can be present in your life, have full gratitude of everything that surrounds you, but also be able to want these things as well, but also be able to wait patiently for them when you need to go after them. And I call that aligned action too. So aligned action is coming from that place of wholeness instead of lack, right? Where a lot of us come from, whether it's our fitness journey, whether it's wanting to find that perfect relationship, whether it's starting that business, it's all these different areas of life. We come from this place of lack. The meaning of lack truly is that I believe that I would be better off somewhere else versus where I'm at right now. And we can operate from this place in any area of life, whether this is my physical body, whether this is the perfect relationship, whether this is making X amount of money, right? And when we operate from this place, you know, we're always trying to get somewhere. We're always trying to get somewhere in our life. We're always chasing after happiness. But abundance, right? Abundance is different because abundance is right here, right now. It's actually a spiritual practice. It's a state of being. Like I said, it's full presence, gratitude in your life, and then being able to make aligned action coming from that place. And they're just two different places to really come from, versus when we come from lack, this is where we have an opposite reaction, right? Anytime, you know, in functional medicine, I always talk when, you know, there's input somewhere in the body, there's an opposite reaction. Probably not saying that very correct, but that's what happens. So when we come from a place of lack, let's say in entrepreneurship and in business, right? And we're striving to make X amount of money, to have that notoriety, we see the opposite reaction very often of burnout and exhaustion, right? So they may have attained a certain level of quote unquote success, chasing after their quote unquote happiness, but they sacrificed their presence in the moment because they weren't actually present in anything that they were doing.
Yeah.
They were hustling for their worthiness, and they had health issues and burnout and exhaustion. And if we go back to even my story, right? So I was striving and trying to get to this place of what I thought was perfection, right? Physical perfection. And the result was burnout, gut issues, hormonal imbalances of trying to get somewhere. And that's not really what health is. So I think, you know, one of my greatest journeys and things that I get to really help other people and women in particular with is, how can we really heal this relationship we have with ourselves? How can we create from this place of wholeness, from this place of being, from this place of gratitude, and still attain the things that we want in our life, but not coming from this place of lack, actually coming from a place of love.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because there's a framing perspective there, right? Lack, should, could, would. It's not, I should be the CEO. It's like, oh, I did this. How can I become the CEO? It's a little bit different than I should be. I'm lacking not being in that position of power. But I want to gear it more toward women right now, as women are your main clients. And from what I hear in the conversations I have and women that I know and stuff like that, women tend to sacrifice something. And it's usually health. It's usually well-being, maybe self-love. It's like you become a mother. Now you don't have time for X. You are a boss executive at work, and then you have to be a wife, and then you have to be this. And there's never time for like self, and then maybe they become overweight or stressed out or something starts happening. I hear sometimes women like, oh, I would love to get one of your hoodies, but I do nothing nice for myself. It goes for everybody else. It's for my kids and my husband and it's like, how do you deal with that conversation? That doesn't just apply to women. I know in most cases it falls on that capacity. But how do you start dealing with that conversation of guilt and shame?
One, this is really my ego here. And I mentioned ego a little bit, and we tend to think of ego as like, oh, that person is very boastful. They're very full of themselves. When I talk about ego, I don't mean it necessarily in that way. I mean it in our false view of self, right? So there's this false view that we have of ourself. It's the identity that we have of ourself that is based off of all of these external things, but it is also based off of our pain. And all of these things become our identity. So we have to become aware of, in those moments, that this is actually my ego. We can call it actually the pain body too, because the pain body is a part of the ego. And I give an analogy of the pain body. I don't know if you've ever been in a romantic relationship and you've been in like a fight with them, and all just normal like respect that you had probably had goes out the window, and you're looking into your person's eyes and you do not even see the light in their eyes anymore. You just see nothing but pain. I think a lot of us can relate to that experience, right? When you look into somebody's eyes and you just see utter pain in there, and you're like, I don't even see light in there. And it's usually in moments of a fight with a romantic partner, in a deep trigger, right? And that's our pain body. That's a part of our ego, which our pain body is always dormant most of the time. Some people have a heavier pain body. Some people have ones that are a little bit more quiet. But in a lot of these moments, our pain body can be activated, and our pain really is also our identity. So we're identified with that pain. So having that awareness of who is really running the show is how we begin to actually heal and relate to ourselves coming from a different place. I could do all of the affirmations all day long, right? And be like, I deserve to have my time with myself and all this stuff. But there's this deep, still unconscious identity that I have of myself, though. And I may have this belief of myself that I'm not worthy of, I'm not good enough. I come last, and everybody's view of self is different. It's like this core belief of self that we carry that creates, right, all of our circumstances of, I'm not going to buy that sweater. If I don't have things, that I'm going to work my ass off because I don't deserve to actually take time to myself. It creates these circumstances. And it also shows up in relationships, right? I'm going to sacrifice myself for this person. I'm going to never do anything for myself. But hey, this is just who I am. No, it's because of this core belief of self that is your pain body, that is really at the core of your ego. So awareness first. And then once we have the awareness, we become more conscious of it. So I say when we're not aware, we're very unconscious. This is how a lot of people operate from. And as we have this awareness, we can actually begin to disidentify. So I use the analogy A dog. So awareness is the A, D is the disidentify. So we can disidentify with our thoughts, with our pain, disidentify with, whatever emotions may be coming up sometimes in the moment, but just know that, yes, I have these thoughts, I have these emotions, but I am not these things. And sometimes you can do this in a meditation practice. So I've done meditations before when I'm just noticing myself like, in it, and you're just like, okay, my ego's here, it's here, I know it, and I have the awareness. I'm like, it's strong here today, man.
Hey, friend.
We have those days, and I'll just kind of close my eyes, and I'm like, okay, I have a body, but I am not my body. I have these things, but I'm not these things. These things are important, but they don't matter. And I kind of bring myself through this meditation of slowly disidentifying from all of these things outside of myself, bring myself back into presence. So disidentifying, I'd say, is that next step, because as long as we are identified, we can't heal from it. As long as we are identified with our thoughts and with our pain, we can never actually truly heal from them.
So it's getting past that into that next level, right? Breaking through the wall, the mask, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But those are the things that protect you, right? Keep you safe, keep you in the comfort zone, even though it might be uncomfortable, but it's your normal. It's what you're used to. Yeah. So what's that next?
The O Yeah, so awareness, disidentify, then it's taking ownership. So ownership is a part of self-love. It's taking ownership for all emotions that are there, all parts of us, for our ego. And it's not saying that I am these things, but this is mine, and I'm gonna actually hold space for it as well. And I always give an analogy when I talk about ownership, because for some people it's hard to picture, what does that mean, ownership, right? And if you've ever seen a little kid in the grocery store who's like having a tantrum, right? He's like on the ground, throwing a fit, like kicking and screaming. He wants that chocolate bar, but mom's like, no, we're not getting it, and he's just throwing a fit. Well, a mom could get down and be like, stop it right now. Stop that. What does the kid do?
It goes harder.
He goes harder, right? So that's not ownership. But what a grounded mama will do, and we can all relate to this because we've all seen that grounded mama before. The grounded mama will have her kid kind of throwing a tantrum, and she will get down on the ground. She will allow and acknowledge the kid. She won't try to make him stop, but she'll just hold space for him. She'll just get down on the ground, very grounded, very confident, but from a place of love, and just hold space. And what does the kid then begin to do?
Starts to calm down.
He starts to calm down, right? Because we're not resisting anything, we're just holding space for. Sometimes when there are emotions there below the surface, that means, noticing where the emotions are in the body. It's holding space for them, like feeling the charge. It's feeling that emotion come up. And for a lot of women, because I've worked with a ton of women who are in burnout, right? Who never take time for themselves. And when they actually sit with themselves, and they get quiet and they actually tune into their body, just all this emotion starts to come up. All this frustration and this anger and this sadness and this pain. And they're like, well, where is this coming from? I don't want this to be there. Get rid of this. Get rid of this. And it's like, no, like this is good. This is what is there. This is what is below the surface. And it's holding space for that. And that's actually what healing is. So that's what healing is, because it's all of this pain and this emotion that's trapped in the body that can't get out, that manifests in dis-ease in the body, that manifests in all of these things. So we hold space and we have ownership for whatever is there. We say, this is mine.
So in that case, it's also taking personal responsibility, but just out of curiosity, can we hold, and I'm dumbing down the question on purpose, because I think the answer is obviously yes, but I still want to ask it. Can we hold space for ourselves to take ownership? And at what point in our relationship that's a maturation, right? We have to be mature enough, disidentify, and get to the point of like, okay, I see you, little boy, little girl, little me, little hurt me, and let me hold space for myself to then have my older self take ownership of the younger self. It sounds complicated, but...
Yeah, your higher self, right? So that higher self is really your true authentic self, right? That's able to step into this scene. And as you're going throughout this entire process, that is really what's taking place, is your higher self, the parent really. We're self-parenting ourselves, just like that grounded mama, in a lot of ways. And I think from after we go into that ownership place, we can then really ground ourselves back into the present moment. And the more we kind of go through this, it happens actually pretty fast. Sometimes at the beginning, as we're very unaware of it, we kind of need to go through this like step by step by step. You become more aware of when you're operating from that place, from that ego place, the more you've started to really diagnose of like, okay, and you can know you're operating from this place anytime you have any negative emotion. Anytime you're not feeling peace, you're operating from that place. Anytime you're relating to yourself in some way. You're resisting something. You're judging something. And you're not present. And if you're not present, you're judging and you're resisting, you don't have peace. Then you're operating from the ego.
You're reacting versus responding.
Exactly. Yeah. And as you do this, I think that higher self, the big S self, is able to step on the scene more and more. And the ego becomes smaller and smaller, where that's really the place now that you're operating from. You're operating from your true authentic self, which is who you are when you are fully present. Our authentic self is not who we are when we're caught up in our mind and doing and all of these things, and we're judging, and we're always constantly judging. We're judging other people. We're judging ourselves. We're resisting things. This is good. This is bad, right? That's all the ego. But when we're fully present, and I know you're an artist, right? So like who you are, like when you're fully present in your artwork, like that is you, your most authentic self. You probably feel the most peaceful, the most joyful ever. So
the least amount of stuff's in my head in those moments.
Right?
Yeah.
You're not in your head at all. And that's your highest self in that moment, which can only be experienced, can't be described. We can't actually describe who we are. We can only experience who we are. People can ask me all day, Rachel, who are you? You know, old me would list off all of my accomplishments. You know, maybe there's a little bit more like elevated version, which would be like, I'm a visionary, I'm a creator, you know, these things, which is great. It's still a lot more elevated than listing off all my accomplishments. But the truth is you can't know who I am by me explaining it to you. You can only experience who I am.
Very true. Yeah. That's the thing. We can read the resume. We could read the cover of the book. But unless you really dive into it and hold space with him, her, whatever it is, then we get to experience it. I like that. I like how you worded that. This makes a lot of sense. So curiosity, because now we're going to go back. And, you know, when I was a personal trainer and when I was going through college to become an orthopedic surgeon, I did a lot of nutrition counseling and stuff as well. It was never about the food. It was always about, like, what are you thinking? What are your triggers? What are your emotions? And back then, 20 years ago when I was doing this, I was nowhere near in the practice of the space that I am now, but I still knew it's like, what is causing you to do X? What is causing you to do Y? And, like, unpacking this is really the root cause. So I'm sure one led you to the other, led to, okay, we've got to heal to actually then do it. My wife was coaching during the pandemic. Her business shut down, so she got certified and started coaching. You know, she just had a baby. She lost her weight. She did all that. She's like, I'm going to coach mamas and help people, show them, like, you can be fit. You can be a mom. You can do all these things and be healthy. And she had just so much invested in these women. Like, she loved so hard and knew it was possible because she did it. And she's like, we're having the same conversations every week, and these women are crying. Like, I know what I need to do, but I can't do it. And they're shoving the McDonald's down or the everything else. But it really comes down to, like, the mental game. Yeah. How do you break through to these women, these people, these humans, to accept the physical plan is the physical plan, but it's all this other stuff. Like, do you have a couple of steps, some, you know, cheat sheet that people could kind of help themselves with? What is that question? What should I start noticing? What should I start practicing to then also be open to, like, hey, I'm going to email Rachel. Like, she's who I need to really figure out what's going on with me, because I know it's not just me eating the cupcakes in the closet.
Yeah.
That's the surface thing. We know that's the problem, but that's not the problem.
Yeah. A lot of people know, right, that I should be eating better. I shouldn't be doing this, but, like, we keep doing it. Yeah. Right. And when we get into nutrition coaching, I think a lot of us, I know for myself, when I first got started, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to give people the plan. They're going to follow it. They're going to get results because I got awesome results and they're going to get awesome results. And we're like, oh my gosh, they're not following it. Yep. Right? Or are they following it? And just like you said, we run into behaviors. Yeah. Right? We're running into people's behaviors. And, you know, I'm all about getting to the root cause. So where do behaviors come from? Where do these behaviors come from? Whether it's controlling, avoidant, critical, like, these are all just different behaviors that we carry that, and if we were to follow people around, follow these women around, you would see some patterns of behavior that they have in their life. So behaviors really come back to our view of self, the way in which we're relating to ourselves. And I think for a lot of nutritionists, like this is like the deep work, which for many is like, okay, this is a little bit beyond my capacity. But what a lot of coaches can really do is bring awareness to the other person by asking them questions, right? I think a lot of people are so unaware of their thoughts. They don't realize that they are literally creating in every single moment of their entire life. There's never a moment you're not creating.
Yeah.
As long as you're thinking.
So I say everyone's a creator, everyone's creative. They just don't think they are.
Constantly creating. Yeah. Everything you have in your life right now, you have created 100%. Right? So I find with working with clients when they're running into different roadblocks, I first like to question their thoughts and what's really coming up for them. What is the story here? What are the thoughts that are coming up for you in these moments? And a lot of them may not be able to really even pin them down, right? They can't say, this is exactly what I was thinking. But I think even sometimes planting those seeds, they start to pay attention to what some of those thoughts are. What are some of the feelings that are coming up? What are the triggers, right? And we can begin to explore by looking into the thought patterns, what's really coming up and the way that this person is relating to themselves in a lot of different ways. So I do think it comes into questioning very often. I think a lot of us, in moments when we're stressed, right? Like for a lot of these ladies, I know for a lot of people I work with, it's like at the end of the day, right? I'm stressed, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. My discipline is at the lowest. I haven't eaten, I haven't planned, I haven't prepared, whatever it may be. And it's easiest to just go get that fast food or, the food's right there and it's not healthy and I'm just going to eat it. And then all my self-control just goes out the window. So I think it's one, noticing in those moments first, like what are the triggers that I have for myself? Because we all have various triggers. And the trigger also ignites some kind of an emotional response. And you can actually turn everything into a spiritual practice, right? So some of the things that you can actually start to have your clients do if you're a coach is, all right, when you notice the trigger and you notice that like impulse, what I want you to do is to actually just sit with that feeling for literally just 2 minutes. For 2 minutes. And for a lot of people, that's really, really hard, right? Because it's this addiction, this automatic pattern that we've developed of I have a trigger, which the trigger is this negative emotion. There's a charge behind it. It comes from only a thought, and emotion is created from that. And then as a byproduct, I impulsively want to get rid of that feeling as fast as possible. I want to run away from that feeling. So I'm going to grab the food. I'm going to grab whatever I can around so I can get rid of that feeling. So I think sometimes explaining that to people can help because it brings awareness, but saying, hey, when you notice that trigger come up, when you notice that feeling, I just want you to pause and sit with it. 2 minutes. 2 minutes and that's it. And just notice kind of where it's at in the body, where it's coming up. And for some people, they may get to the 2 minute mark and they start to become a bit more present. They start tuning into their body, that charge kind of slowly goes down. For some people, they get to the 2 minutes and they're like, oh my God, it's still here. I still want the food. And maybe they do grab the food and they do eat it, but you know what? They made it 2 minutes longer than what they did the last time.
Yeah.
You can get to that 2 minute mark and say, you know what? Can I go 2 more minutes? And it becomes actually this spiritual practice of you really grounding yourself, creating awareness, disidentifying from your thoughts, and really just tuning in with your body and seeing what's coming up for you in those moments. And eventually it becomes easier and easier. So I'd say like that's an active in the moment, but I do think outside of that, there's also like the bigger healing, right? Because a lot of these women probably are coming from a place of, I don't believe I'm worth it. I was the fat kid. I'm always going to be the fat kid type stories that they're really operating from. And there has to be a disidentification that comes from that.
Yeah, that's interesting because in this space, unless you're like about to die, right? You're going to be diabetic if you don't switch your diet. Okay, let me do something, doctor. Or you're your arteries are shutting down. You need to cut out all saturated fats, cholesterol, cheese, whatever. Like, unless it's that dire, people don't want to work on that practice. And how hard is it to notice? We don't even notice. And just the practice of just notice and practicing noticing is something to continue to work at. Yeah, if it is 2 minutes, make it further.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, when I tell people to, like, what I eat, and I eat dessert, and I eat pizza, I eat all the things, and I say, you know what, sometimes I just want the cake. And I used to tell my clients back in the day, if you want the cake, eat the cake. Because most of the time when we're in an aware cycle of trying to change habits, we do every other thing under the sun to not eat the cake. Let's just say nutrition in the moment. We eat an extra salad, an extra apple, a banana, chicken broth, all these other things. And that's another 1,000 calories. And then we still end up caving and eating the cake. So I'm like, just notice, allow yourself, give yourself permission to make the choice, because now you're in control of the choice you made, and then deal with it later, instead of avoiding it, crashing and burning, caving in, and then still continuing to spiral. I think it's...
Yeah. I think there is the difference between actively making the choice, right? Like, I actively make choices that, like, I want to eat a burger or things like that, right? But I'm choosing to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm also in a place where, like, I don't have anything really off in my body, disease, or there's not anything going on, right?
Yeah.
So we always have to pay attention to, like, okay, what is always going to be, like, there is a consequence, right, for different things. And, like, let's say you are relatively healthy, you're not like a type 2 diabetic, you're not like have heart disease or something, right? You know what? Like, is it the end of the world if you have that piece of cake? No, but if you're coming from a place of where there's a lot of things off and you have that, you know, after that, you're probably not going to feel good about it. Like, you may feel good about it in the moment, but you're not going to feel good about it because you're not actually choosing to do something that's loving for yourself. And I do think self-love oftentimes is coming in as that parent of, like, man, I know you don't want to do this. I know you don't want to do this, but this is for you. This is the best thing for you. And in some instances that may be, you know what, eat the cake. And maybe eat the cake.
Yeah.
In some instances that it is, you know what, we need to eat the steak and the broccoli and the sweet potato, and we need to not have the cake. And it's so different for every person, right? So that's what I think was hard. And even in the fitness industry, we make it very much black and white. This is good, this is bad. It's so individualized to each person, right? I could come home from a day at work and be utterly exhausted, right? But be like, okay, I told myself I was going to go work out. And typical fitness industry just has the mindset of, like, just like, suck it up, go work out, right? But if I were to force myself to go work out, I could come back, feel worse, and feel exhausted as a byproduct of it. Where the most loving thing actually for myself and me loving myself was saying, you know what? Just rest tonight. And I know because there's peace after I make that decision. And then I wake up the next day and I feel more energized. And you know what? I crush my workout that next day. And then there's some instances, maybe I'll come home from work and I'm just like, man, I don't really want to go work out. I'm just not really feeling it.
Yeah.
And then I make the decision to, like, not go work out. But then there's, like, this kind of nagging voice
Little guilt
inside
and
me,
shame
like, this,
around
like,
it.
I
Yeah.
should have kind of gone, and I didn't feel so great about it after. Where in that instance, maybe the most loving thing for me was to say, Rachel, get off your booty, go work out, go get in the gym.
Yeah.
And I go work out, I get in the gym, and I come back, and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I went. I feel 10 times better. But it takes really knowing yourself to be able to operate from that place, to be able to operate that place with food, to be able to say, you know what, I'm gonna eat the cake and I'm not gonna feel guilty about it at all. Or to be able to kind of self-parent ourselves and say, you know what, you know, I know I want the cake. I know the cake looks good and I'm sure it is good, but I'm gonna say no because I value this here more than anything else. So it really comes down to what we value. What's most important. I know for a lot of people, you know, when they try to get healthy and go on a fitness journey, right? You know, they're told that they can't go out to eat anymore. And for that person, how they may operate with connecting with their person is going out on date night and enjoying that. And now you're telling them to take away something that is a huge value for them. Maybe
Yeah.
the food wasn't so much of the value piece, but they're taking away that connection with their person, right? So we're never going to override what our values are. So I do also think it's knowing what we value, what is most important, and knowing exactly what it is that we value. Like I'm working with a couple right now where that is how they have date night. They go out, they want to sit at a bar together, and I'm like, I'm not going to take that away from you guys.
Just make better choices.
But I'm going to give you some recommendations of some like good, like I'm like, let's go to True Foods Kitchen. Let's go to like places like that are a little bit better. And, you know, I think too, coming from this place, kind of coming back full circle here, but coming from this place of really self-love, we also have to actually have a relationship with ourselves. We have to spend time with ourselves. And a lot of us, we don't spend time with ourselves, right? If you want to have a good relationship with your wife, with boyfriend, girlfriend, your significant other, you actually have to spend time with them, right? You have to spend time with them. And a lot of us don't spend time with ourselves. We don't actually get to know ourselves, like who we are when we're fully present, when we're by ourselves, when we're with ourselves, because it's from that place that we can really check in with ourselves and be like, all right, what is it that I need here? What's going on? What's coming up for me? I know for me, like I can tell very easily when something is not aligned internally with me, because I just will notice kind of that unease feeling internally. And I'm like, okay, there's something not in alignment in my life. I maybe won't sleep well that night. And instead of brushing it off and ignoring it, I'm like, there's something internally that's not aligned. I need to pay attention to it. And I use that as a guide. And that's what our body's always continuously doing. It's this guide to bring us back to wholeness, to bring us back to peace. But we just choose to ignore all of the signals.
Yeah. And you know what, I'm hearing a couple things. I'm going to go back a few steps. Number one, power. We can own the power when you're making the choice, whether the choice is good or bad. At least if we're consciously making the choice, we're responding instead of reacting, right? For the cake example, I'm going to choose to have the cake right now. Position of power. Instead of, wow, I ate the cake in the closet hiding. Like now it's shame, guilt. That's a reaction. And right here, relationship to self or being with self, one of the things I notice is I think we lie to each other. I sit here all by myself all day long working or whatever, but I'm not really with myself. I'm by myself. There's a big difference between with and by yourself.
That's a powerful point for sure to make, because after you leave, I'm sure too, spending time by yourself, if you're just on your computer all day, you're on social media, you probably don't feel very recharged.
No, I'm exhausted.
You are by yourself,
yeah.
right? So that is the difference. And again, you'll know it by its fruits, right? So you feel exhausted, you want to go home, and you're like, I actually want to spend time with myself, even though I'm just by myself all day long, right? So there is a difference between being by ourselves, because when we're not present, when we're in our head, you're going to notice that, and that's energy draining. So when we're fully present in what we're doing, when we can get to that place of being, it gives you energy, it gives you life, versus the opposite.
Yeah, no, and it's true. I leave here, I'm by myself all day. I go home. I got my 2-year-old dad. I mean, it's the greatest thing in the world. I'm not complaining. Then my wife's there, and it's like, okay, your turn. Here's all you. And I'm like, wow, I just want like 30 minutes on the couch to lay with myself. Like, so you've been at the studio by yourself all day. Like, there's a huge difference in that. And I think noticing that is true. Yeah. It is important. And it's going back to being. And, you know, when we choose love and when we live through love, we're being love. And when we can be it, we can then do it, and then we can have it. That's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah. And I think coming from that place too of being more present in our life, getting to that place of being, is really where we can come from a place of love. Because when we really know ourselves, when we can really have love for ourselves, right? So it is that self-awareness piece, and then it's self-love that comes after. Self-love is really knowing myself, but knowing myself in my true essence, in my full presence, not what other people think of me and what I think of me based off of what other people think of me, but
what the world wants me to be.
What the world wants me to be, what my accomplishments are, any of those egoic type identities. So when we disidentify from those and we can really know who we are by being fully present in our life, we step into that place of self-love. We have love for ourselves because that's the only thing that is left over, is we have love for ourselves. Because when we're not operating from our ego, we are actually, I believe, connected to God when we are fully present. We are in spirit, right? So why is it that when we're fully present and we're in this creative place, we get inspired?
Yeah.
We get inspired, like, oh my gosh, I had this idea, I want to create, right? You get to a place of inspiration that is in spirit. I am in spirit, and from that place, I am connected to God, which is full love. I have love for myself. And when you have love for yourself, you're able to love other people because really it reflects back to you. It's an equal exchange back. So you can't love somebody else if you don't have that love there for yourself. That's why anybody who is critical or negative or judgmental, you know right off the bat that they're not operating from a place of love with themselves because they're not giving it to you. You can't feel that love for yourself and still be judgment and critical of someone else. Like, there's no way, right? So it is that place of presence and knowing yourself. We have self-love. We're able to give that to other people. And I think that's really the true purpose that we all have. So we have our internal purpose, which is really this healing journey, right? We have that ego. And the ego constantly wants to edge God out, EGO, edge God out. And then when we go through that healing, when we disidentify from the ego, we can get to that place of being in spirit. We get to that place of love. We create self-love. That's our internal purpose. That's the journey we all have. And from our internal purpose, we can create and have an external purpose, right? So that's where inspiration comes from. So I'm in spirit. I have my internal purpose. I'm fully in this place of being authentic and wholeness, and then creating from that place. That's true inspiration, and these people when you meet them, right? There's a lot of people who have notoriety, who have fame, who make a lot of money, but they're not inspiring people. I've met a lot of those people, but I've also met people who are genuinely kind, who are humble, but yet confident at the same time, who listen more than they speak, who can hold space, who are not judgmental. You don't feel their judgment. And to me, that's what inspiration is. And that comes from a place of their love that they have from themselves too.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. Well said. So, a couple of questions as we tie this down. Thank you so much for sharing all that. It sounds complicated, and I think it's easier than it is. And I hope people take away, the message that we just dove into. Like, it starts with self. Are we asking ourselves the questions? Are we being present? Are we noticing? Are we sitting in it? And, what are we disassociating with? What's our identity? Dis-ease? Like, all of this ties in together. When I went and studied kinesiology, which is the study of the human movement of the body, it was never all this other stuff. There was maybe a Psych 101 course in there, and there was a psychology as an athlete for mental performance, and that was still new back then. But a lot of this practice wasn't in there. You hurt a hamstring, and it was just like, you hurt a hamstring. Like,
and then how do you fix it? And even with the psych classes, right? It's like, oh, what is off with that person mentally based off of their symptoms? Let's give them a label, and then let's treat them with medication.
Yeah. So it's important. Yeah. It's not just the diet, the food, what you're putting in your mouth. That does all matter. But what led to those decisions? What led to unpacking all that and who you really are? So thank you for sharing that. So 2 questions. One is, how do you define love?
I'd say love is fully operating from a place of presence in your life, authenticity, being able to see and know yourself, and being able to then see other people. And I'm not talking about seeing people physically, but really being able to see people, like look beyond the ego, look beyond the pain, all of these other things, and really be able to see someone and really know that you are connected to that person, that you guys come from the same God. And that's what love is.
It's a good answer. I don't think there's a wrong answer. So it's a good answer.
There may be a wrong answer.
But you know what the next question is, because you asked me it before I even sat down, and that's, how do you define living a life through love?
Yeah, I'd say that goes hand in hand with living a life of inspiration, right? So it is taking our internal purpose. It is going through this healing, getting back into our true and most authentic self of wholeness, of oneness, which is truly the actual truth of who we've always been. So it's that unbecoming process. And then it's creating from that place. So we all have a divine purpose in our life. I think everybody's purpose is love, truly at the core, but then we have these divine purposes that God has given us, some certain missions that we get to carry out in our life. And that's when we take that internal purpose and we turn it into our external purpose, and we do various things, but coming from that place of love, and coming from that place of really genuinely wanting to give that back to other people.
Thank you. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would have liked me to ask?
I don't think so.
No?
We covered a lot of different places.
Awesome. Sometimes I like to ask that question just to make sure you were heard and I held the space. And lastly, where can everybody find you?
You can follow me on Instagram, Rachel Scheer, Scheer. It kind of looks like Rachel's cheer. Everyone always forgets to see, but I'm not a cheerleader. Website, rachelscheer.com.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Live Through Love. If you love this episode, you'll love this episode.